I think, are we just good to go?
Oh, yeah, I'm just starting the YouTube stream.
Cool.
It should be on now.
Let's refresh. I think it's, yep, cool.
Okay, so what did you work on?
So I've done two writing things. I realized probably a bit too late, that here we, what was it? There was, try to write one paragraph was one of the points I wrote down. Anyway, so I've got two. One of them is a lot more than that, and then the other one I did actually just try and write one paragraph. They're a bit rushed, admittedly. But yeah, I will copy this into tutoring. Um, so yeah, so I had some questions that I wrote down during the first one. Um,
Okay.
but I figured I'm not sure if we should jump to those or, well, it's probably good to read through it first, to give some context. So yeah, this was trying to do some easy explanations. So the exception there is that I dropped some of the, I guess, restrictions on language that I was using in the first one, which I imagine will be fairly obvious. Oh, the restrictions will be fairly obvious when we read it. Yeah, so the second one has a lot more like presumed knowledge, whereas the first one I try not to use various terms and stuff, which is what some of the questions are about, or one of the questions is about.
Okay. Um, so to start with, it looks like your goal was to focus on content, not like grammar, wording, editing, etc. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I figured that those are, well, um, yeah, I figured if I was going to be making mistakes, then those are the ones that I guess I'd want to focus on. Like, um, I mean, I tried not to make grammatical mistakes. There's some commas that I think might be dubious. Um, I did like the first one I rewrote a few times and then included like paragraphs that I cut out at the bottom, um, either as like indications of where I was going or levels of detail that I thought were too much. I guess, yeah. I'm not sure how relevant they are, but I figured I'd keep them instead of deleting them.
Okay, so saying it takes a little bit of time is possibly unnecessary and possibly confusing because depending how hot the hot plate is and how big the pot is and how full of water it is, it could take a couple hours or something, which seems like more than
So
a little.
yeah, I had so this was like regarding a particular problem that I had to begin with, which is where um I think I initially started too broad and I was talking about uh like any process of liquid into gas. Like I was considering or thinking that I would go into like why does like the first sentence that I wrote was something like if you heat up water or you leave it out for a long time, then the water will go away. Roughly. Uh, and so I ended up cutting that, but I didn't want to exclude all of the reference to time because obviously, uh, yeah, there's sort of some sort of significance there. One of the ways that I solved that was by particularly talking about putting it on a hot plate.
Yeah,
Um,
so time is not an issue. It's specifying that the amount of time is little. You're adding a detail there, but the detail is it's a bit vague, like how long is a little bit of time. And I think a lot of the times the way people take it will be incorrect. They'll say, well, I waited a little while and the water was still there. So
Yeah.
you could just delete this and the sentence would still work and it would still make your point that it takes some time, like it's not instant.
So it's sort of like if I'm introducing an extra, or it's better not to introduce an extra detail unless I properly explain it. Um, is that sort of the takeaway, or I mean,
Partly. So there's two different details here. There's one that it takes time, and there's one that the amount of time is small. And small requires a scale, and I think
mm.
it's just inaccurate depending on the case.
So, uh, yeah, I feel like, I mean, it could explain its presence by, uh, like the history, as in what I wrote beforehand. Um, but like, like if I said like sometime instead, it takes some time because the water's heating up. Is that like a better thing to say?
Yeah, because that's not specific. It removes the thing that was causing a problem of saying little. However, saying sometime is not useful compared to just saying time. It doesn't add
Yeah,
any
okay.
extra information.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so I think the error here is assuming context that you don't write down. You have a picture in your mind where, it's a fairly small pot and it's on a fairly high setting on the stove, and you have a concept of how long it should take to boil off, and, to your intuition in that particular scenario, it's only a little while. But the
Yeah.
reader does not share all of your intuitions about how long is a little bit of time, or about what pot it is and how much water's in it and how hot the hot plate is and so on. Like when I hear hot plate, I think um, less hot than a typical stove burner. I don't know if that's actually true or not. I don't have a lot of experience with them, but that's my intuition.
Oh, okay. I wanted to put hot plate instead of stove because I thought stove was like potentially ambiguous. Um, that might be localization stuff though, in terms of if someone said hot plate in the context of a kitchen. Um, uh, yeah. Usually they'd be talking about an electric thing or one of the ones under glass or something like that, but it'd be um, yeah, a stove burner essentially.
Yeah, hot plate to me means like a standalone electric burner, like people bring to college dorms or for
Um,
camping, maybe.
yeah. Fair enough. Um, I guess yeah.
So really hot is also pretty vague. This one doesn't have a correctness problem, like it's hard to object to. Um, it's borderline unnecessary, but if you just say when the water gets hot, it will start bubbling, then that could be misleading because, like, it gets hot before it starts bubbling, I think. Like, there's temperatures that qualify as hot that are pre-boiling.
Yeah.
So really hot is a way to say it. Another way you could say it is when it gets hot enough, it will start bubbling, which kind of
Um,
indicates that there's a cutoff point you have to reach.
so I was thinking about words like enough, and I wasn't sure they were good because I felt like I needed to explain them if I said them. Like I've said, there is some limit that it uh, gets to, and then it starts boiling. But then there's sort of the question of what's that limit. Um, I wanted to avoid saying stuff like in one of the things that I cut, I think, um, uh, maybe I deleted it. Yeah, I can't remember what it was. Sorry.
Okay, so main points. You put the water on the stove, it heats up, it bubbles when it's hot enough, and then the pot gets empty. The water is all gone from the pot somehow. So
Yep.
where does it go and why? Let's see. The hot water is making the bubbles. What we call boiling means the water is turning into steam. So this is a bit of a problem, I think, because people may not link the bubbles themselves to steam. They might think that you're talking about three separate things: the bubbles, the water, and the steam. And they might say, I didn't see any steam, I just saw bubbles. Like I put my hand over it and it didn't seem steamy or something. Like it wasn't fogging up my glasses. So I think saying that the bubbles are steam
Yeah. Okay. So
would
yeah.
help.
Yep. I don't think I say that anyway.
Yeah, people might conceptualize it like in the water you see bubbles, and then at the surface steam is created, and like these happen at the same time, but they might not know the causal connection.
Hmm.
It very similar to like you see the gears turning on the inside of the machine, and then something happens, but the gears turning aren't like transitioning to the outside of the machine in the way the bubbles do. Like people are commonly differentiate an internal process from an external one.
Hmm.
And some of the water, or yeah, some of it boils off without becoming a bubble, just from the surface. I don't know how much it is, like from each method.
I have no idea actually. I'm fairly. I mean, obviously, if there's no bubbles, then it'll still evaporate. But so all of it in that case, like if it was 90 degrees,
Yeah,
that would happen fairly quickly.
right. But if you have like a rolling boil, I don't know what the ratios are going to be like.
Hmm.
Okay, steam is water that's a gas, which means it's not liquid anymore. Okay. Saying a gas means it's not liquid anymore doesn't really explain what a gas is. It's
So
true that a gas is non-liquid, but non-liquid is a very big category.
yeah, um, I think I had an intuition of this because I talk about uh, or a little bit about ice um, later on, um, and I had lots more about like phase transitions and stuff that I cut out because I thought it would like it's sort of going too deep and getting too broad. Um, like I feel like that's a sort of general problem that I have is not being able to like one of the ways that uh, like writing can I guess require extra detail is when or extra explanation is when you put extra details in that are extraneous. So like maybe one of the reasons that I'm feeling like I need to explain like phase transitions is because I'm putting in details that like ask the or beg those questions sort of thing, but I'm not really sure if they're necessary for the main body as such.
Yeah, trying to figure out which details you can omit is pretty important. But also, then, for what you do write, each thing should have a clear purpose, and you should think about, like, how is this useful? Like, gas is not liquid, is not a particularly useful statement because it doesn't have enough, like, substance of saying what it is. Like,
Is it better in this sort of case to like presume because I guess one of the things is that like it's evident that there's a particular audience in mind from like from writing when with any writing there's an audience in mind. Um, if I assume like a higher competence of the audience or like more pre-existing knowledge, then I can not worry so much about that. Like because I've tried to write it really simply, as in like a 5-year-old could understand, uh, it means that I'm sort of catching myself in these things where I'm like introducing terms that I then need to explain. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's fine to try to explain what a gas is. It's just that like if a 5-year-old reads this, he's still not, and he didn't know what a gas was before, he's still not going to know.
Mm.
So you can either assume they know what a gas is, or you can explain it enough that it'll actually solve the problem.
Yep. But here I'm presuming that they don't know what a gas is, but I'm also not explaining it.
Yeah. Like the main thing to do, what for explaining gas, I think, is say that it's like the air, where it's not solid.
Yeah, I ran into when I was talking too much about like it's like the air or whatever else. Well, it's like there was a bit where I wrote out that like I actually mentioned like oxygen and nitrogen and things, and I figured that that was too much in the wrong direction. Um, yeah, that was like too technical for what I was writing.
Yeah, so if they don't know what gas is, they probably don't know how rain works. They don't necessarily know that clouds are made of water, or and certainly not the whole cycle.
No, yeah, my only idea there was just that rain comes out of the sky and this is going into the sky, I guess. Um, that's pretty uh yeah, I mean it's definitely not like rain in reverse in many ways. It's not like the droplets form and then fly up to the ceiling.
I find the still very hot kind of odd. Um,
Um,
like you're sort of suggesting that there's a time limit and then the steam will cool down while still being steam.
hmm. So yeah, that's a bit of a I mean, on the one hand, I guess there was something about if I'm writing this for a 5-year-old, I should probably tell them that it's hot. Um, on the other hand, there's still a bit of a legacy of like thinking about water evaporating without being at boiling temperature. I mean, I sort of don't explain that in this at all. Um, I'm not sure if I mentioned much about it cooling. I sort of mentioned something about it cooling down in like the second to last line. Um, but it gets even more, if I kept in some of the paragraphs that I cut about like phase transitions, then it gets even more sort of complicated because like how can it be a gas when it's colder than some of the water that's still water type thing. Um, yeah.
This is kind of confusing too. Like you bring up a flat top and gaps around the edges. So you're jumping into a geometrical explanation. So it's kind of a conceptual shift to view. It's sort of like viewing the water as a solid object when it's a liquid. Like this kind of description is typical of solid volumes. Whereas we see liquid as more amorphous and not really having a shape and just filling the container. But you're describing
Yeah.
it like the water itself has a shape to it.
So I originally wrote fills and I thought that was not precise enough. Um, because particularly because I wanted to bring up a solid like next. Uh, and I mean, if a solid was big enough, wouldn't that also fill the thing? It's sort of like, yeah, I feel like this is getting myself into that issue again where I've included too many details, and so I'm trying to describe something that's um
Yeah, so
sort of
also
beyond the scope.
you say the pot with a flat top and no gaps around the edges, this can be read as the modifiers apply to the pot. So the pot rather than the water
Yeah.
has a flat top. That was my initial reading, as I thought there was now a lid on the pot, and it was a flat lid. Okay, so um, I'll keep reading. All right, paragraphs I cut. Okay, freezing was not necessary to include, I think.
Hmm.
So I agree with trying to cut that. Right, and then we have these phase transition-y things.
Yeah, by the time I got to sublimation, I figured that it was probably a bit over the top.
Yeah. Chemicals or molecules? It depends on your audience. If you're going for explaining it to a 5-year-old, then I would avoid those words.
Yeah, so I guess the general sort of question here is, uh, I guess when is introducing terms okay? Um, and I guess like if I'm introducing ideas like that, I feel like like if I was going to reference molecules, then I either need to like in this sort of context and this for this audience, then I'd either need to explain what they are or maybe write a thing about it beforehand, like what are molecules or something like that. Um, maybe, can you make something smaller and smaller forever or whatever would be a good topic for that. Um, but yeah, but it's I guess the like the takeaway is that you've like if I include terms, then they have to fit in with the entire sort of uh, feeling of the article. Like it's got to fit the audience and the rest of the like level of emergence of the article or the amount of knowledge that it assumes one has. Um, and that has to be consistent across the whole article.
Yeah, consistency is very important, having a purpose or goal, and then making everything fit the theme. And then you can consider for each thing, like what does it add to the purpose or goal? And that
Yep.
lets you prioritize things and decide what to include or exclude. And talking to a particular audience is a common part of the goal that helps give you info about how to present things and what to include and so on. Like if you have an audience in mind, then you can imagine what do they already know? What do they need to be told? What sort of responses would they have? What questions would they raise? So you can like pre-address some of the most common questions.
Yeah.
And that also deals with the explain everything mode. If you have a clear goal, then that helps you decide what needs explaining.
Yep. So if my goal was to write like a thing about why do pots get empty when you boil water that could be understood by someone who doesn't know what chemicals or molecules are, for example. I mean, I guess I can add that to the goal later. Like if the goal is like not as well defined, then and I have a question like what should I introduce chemicals or molecules as a term? Then if the goal's not clear enough, then I can refine the goal. Um, and then that's the way that I can then judge whether to include it or not, or what's appropriate.
Yeah, so a good writing approach is to brainstorm ideas that could be included and then to go through them and choose which ones are the most important and then make a quick little outline, like figure out how you could organize them. So let's give that a try. So if we're going to do a 5-year-old, then we don't want to talk about atoms, molecules, state changes, that kind of stuff. So what can we say instead? We can say things like, boiling breaks water into tiny, tiny pieces.
Yep.
The pieces move fast. They're too small to see. They're small, they're light enough to move around in the air.
Um, I mean, the small pieces don't get heavier or lighter depending on, well, I mean, maybe marginally, with the energy they've got. Um, is it an issue? Like one of the things that I was thinking about as well is like inaccuracies. So, like when I was thinking of writing that all chemicals go from solid to liquid to gas, um, then like the inaccuracy of sublimation was like bothersome. Um, how much should we care about that sort of thing? I mean, I guess the other thing is that the pieces are light enough to move around in the air. They're always light enough to move around in the air. Um, but for some of the time they don't for some reason. I mean, do we care about buoyancy like as a thing? I mean,
Right, so you could try to get into density and stuff, but I don't think you want to.
no, I agree.
People know in general that stuff has exceptions, especially when they're 5, and that you're trying to explain the main point and giving them somewhat of an approximation. So you want to consider things like, when they learn the truth later, like if they take science classes, will they be like surprised? Will they feel betrayed? Will they be like, oh my god, I totally misunderstood it before? Or will they see this as sort of building on what they've been told in the past and making it better? Like with Santa, when they find out, they feel betrayed and like the rug has now been pulled out from under them, everything changes. There's no incremental progress there. But I think you could go from a concept of like, if something is light enough, it can be in the air more easily to more accurate models
Mm.
without like a big disruption.
Mm. I mean, I guess the one of the so it occurs to me that maybe there's like some kind of meta goal stuff happening in that like what would the goal of the reader be to read an explanation like this? And that, might be something like to be able to have like useful information to predict what's going to happen with certain stuff. So like this has a fair amount of predictive capability, like it predicts that it goes into the air. It predicts that like if we heat it up a lot, then it'll um, do that. Um, yeah.
Do you want to add anything to the list?
Um, uh, no, I think that's It's pretty good. Just trying to read over what I wrote to see if there's anything obvious, but I don't think so. Yeah, okay.
I'm wondering if the tiny pieces thing is a good idea or if it's too complicated.
It's so it's sort of, I mean,
I think something about it breaking up, because they see all the water together is very visible and it seems like an object. And then when it's in the air, it's split up, it's separated.
it it doesn't happen all at once either. Like that was one of the things I was thinking about with the hot
Yeah.
plate. Like the reason that time is important is because when you put the water on the hot plate, it doesn't like immediately vanish. Um, so the tiny pieces I think sort of helps in that uh, it gives us a way to explain why it is like why it's incremental, um, why it can go into the air because it doesn't go into the air all as one big piece, um, or as little droplets. It goes in as like even tinier pieces. Um, I mean, if we go down the path of tiny pieces, then uh, it's useful in that you can like talk about how some of the pieces when they get hot they start like moving around and then some of them manage to like break away from the rest of the water and like go into the air. I don't know if that's too much because you might involve like, into
Yeah,
molecular
I was kind of trying
bonds,
to
but yeah.
avoid explaining what temperature is.
Mm. Yeah, that was one of the things I struggled with was how to avoid explaining certain things that aren't strictly relevant.
Like heat makes water boil. When it's hot, tiny pieces break off and get into the air. Few at a time. They float around as steam, a gas. They're too small to see unless a bunch happens at once. Eventually all the water goes into the air.
We say a bunch happens at once, like a bunch clumped together in one
Yeah,
spot.
like I meant a bunch
I guess if
tiny pieces breaking off. Unless there are a bunch in a small area of air. So this isn't great, but it's okay, I think. It's like a starting point.
hmm,
So then you can consider like, was anything left out that seems important? And do any of the inelegancies need cleaning up? It depends a lot on how much information the person wants, because you could explain it a lot more or a lot, or you could explain it even less. Like, it goes into the air a little bit at a time, like one sentence even.
yeah. So do we care about how hot?
I mean, hot enough to
This
boil.
um
Not especially, I don't think. I think a 5-year-old
yeah,
can
'cause,
understand, like, you add a bunch of heat, or you heat it up a bunch, and then this happens. Without, they don't need to know, like, how much. I think they don't need
well,
joules or something.
5-year-old probably just thinks of things as hot, like warm, normal, cool, and cold, or something like that. So hot is probably good enough for.
Yeah. They might have a spectrum, but they don't need to know. They don't have it
Don't you know
defined
how
as
hot?
quantities. Okay, so there's different ways you could write it. Like, water is made of tiny pieces of water. Single pieces can break off and float around in the air. They're too tiny to see. When water gets hot, it boils and more pieces get into the air. If you boil it enough, all the water ends up in the air. Sometimes you can see the steam, which is steam is water broken into tiny pieces. Like there's a different approach,
Hmm.
has some of the same information, somewhat different. One of the things I didn't talk about was the bubbles. So like bubbles in a pot are water. So we could do a different one. So when you boil water, the heat makes bubbles. The bubbles are water gas. They get into the air. Eventually, there's no liquid water left.
Hmm.
That's another attempt without actually explaining states properly. Why don't you try writing another one and see what you can
Yeah.
come
Okay.
up with?
Um. Um. Okay. Um. So I'm just thinking. The first thing I'm trying to think of is what approach to take. Like each of the three examples that you've written there have like a different approach. Um. I guess what is the So the second one is like a pieces approach in terms of it's all in terms of the little bits.
Yeah, I
But
was trying to have some sort of theme and then use it.
yeah. So well, temperature could be a theme.
Yeah.
Um. So uh, sort of like the first one, but all right. Um. Water boils when you make it hot. Um. Uh. So one thing I'm afraid of being derivative. Um. Like of what
Uh,
you've just written.
yeah, I think don't worry about that too much.
Okay.
Just
Water
write
boils.
anything.
When you make it hot. Uh. It heats up. Some tiny bits of water get hotter than the other bits. If those bits are on top, they go straight into the air. if those bits aren't on top, they still they become a gas and go straight into the air. When those bits aren't on top, they still become a gas, but because they're underwater, under the rest of the water, they turn into bubbles. These bubbles aren't air bubbles, they're steam bubbles. Eventually, all the water gets hot enough to have gone into the air, and there's none left in the pot. All right.
Yeah, I think this is pretty reasonable. It's probably a bit much for a 5-year-old, but I can imagine an audience who would find this useful, like maybe a little older. I think they
Yep.
probably have some follow-up questions, but that's okay. I mean, it depends on the setting. Like if you're going for a blog post, then you have to be careful about how many follow-up questions are people going to have, because they're probably not going to ask. Like if you're talking to someone in person, which is sort of the scenario I was imagining, I don't know about you, then
Mm-hmm.
having some follow-up questions can work well, so it's more interactive, and you see what issues they want to bring up.
Yep.
So like
Yeah.
they might ask why gases would go into the air.
Yep. Well, I mean, I guess then one of the things you could write is like about the gases don't need to go into the air. They could go into like a balloon if you had like a way to catch it or whatever. 'Cause that's the thing we do. Um,
Yeah, I mostly had in mind going into the air as opposed to just staying in the pot. Like, why doesn't the steam just sit around in the pot?
hmm.
Like, the fact that it's changed to a different form doesn't imply that it's going to move to a different location.
Yep. Um, so one of the ways that I could answer that is like when it heats up, some bits of water get hotter than other bits. When bits of water get hot enough, they jiggle around so much that they turn into a gas. We can take that out. So those bits are on top, they go straight into the air. They still become a gas. When something is a gas, it means the little bits are moving around, or the little bits are jiggling so much they don't fall down, stay in one spot. Instead float around. So like that I think would answer a few of those questions. It does bring up this thing as in like they jiggle around so much that they turn into a gas.
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about answering all the questions preemptively. I was just
Hmm.
mentioning it as one of the like more prominent gaps in the explanation, I thought. Let's look at the mirror one, unless you have more questions
Yep.
about this.
What were the Yeah, the other one was just, I guess, explaining everything mode. But I feel like we've sort of covered that. But yeah, let's go to the mirror one. So this was I was particularly attempting to do one paragraph and like different audience. It's not meant to be uh like it's meant to be someone with pre-existing knowledge this time. Um, I figured
Okay.
like the fact that like light comes from you sort of thing is assumed that people know that much. Um, one thing I've just realized. So the second line, there's a problem there. I'm just going to fix it up. Um, yeah, this case.
This one I find a little strange. I don't know who would have the camera question, or who like knows what light is but doesn't know
Yeah.
that the mirror won't have a picture of you when you're not there.
Um, yeah, I was trying to think like in terms of this question. So I pulled it out of the. I mean, in the list it was just below the other one. Um, when I wrote them down. And I was trying to think what to focus on. Like below that, I wrote down a question about why do mirrors seem to flip things like horizontally but not vertically. Um, but uh, this one is like, why would someone ask this question? And it's sort of like, I guess I focused on yourself as part of the keyword, or part of the like as a key concept there, as opposed to like, why does a mirror show an image sort of thing? Uh, so yourself seemed to be a thing.
Alright, here's my quick version.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the camera thing is like a large tangent that's not necessary for the stated goal. Like I would expect to see stuff about the camera if the question was specifically related to cameras in some way, or something similar. Because I think that the thing you're trying to address is not like a standard question people would have about how mirrors work.
Mhm. So the reason I included the camera was that I wanted a way to like something that like to juxtapose that sort of shows that it must be an image of you in the mirror, but only I mean this is sort of one of the things, right? The question of like why does a mirror show an image of yourself? They're sort of implied when you're looking at it in that. Um,
Yeah.
I mean I guess people intuitively understand that they don't show an image of yourself when you're not looking at it, or if they do, it's because you're near the mirror and someone else is looking at it, or whatever else. Um, sort of actually a difficult thing to nail down in terms of defining that or like describing that sort of phenomena completely. Um,
Okay, so let's try some other ones, I think.
so, well, we could try the one of the ones that's probably good for a more like educated audiences, and the question is in line with like the level of explanation or the level of detail, is to do with the why it seems to reflect things horizontally. Um, I went and checked some explanations online uh, earlier, so I've got that reasonably fresh in my mind. Um,
The issue with that one is it's more of
Hmm.
a science question than a writing prompt. Like more of the difficulty is about how do you explain the issue, like the content, rather than about how do you write it and how do you communicate. Like I think the topic itself is tricky, which is different
So,
than like writing about the topic being tricky. But you can give
so,
it a try since you looked it up.
um, uh, so one thing, just do you mean by that that like science, like, I'm not even sure if you're making a comment
Like
on whether science questions are harder or easier. Um,
what I mean is most of the difficulty of the project is in understanding what's going on rather than in writing it down, I think.
yeah, okay. Doesn't that also mean that like the way that it's written down is sort of more important because there's like it's more difficult to get the explanation across. The explanation is sort of touches more stuff. Um, I think I see what you mean, but I'm sort of yeah, still not entirely clear.
Yeah, so communicating about it is hard, but like for you, the thing you have to work on to do it is to figure out how the actual issue works. Like that's the main part of the task
Yeah, okay.
is understanding what's going on.
Yep. As
It's
opposed to
like
the other examples where I don't have to
yeah, you
do
don't
that.
have to look up like how boiling works.
All right. Oh, let's start with something simpler then. Because I feel like that might end up being distracting. Um, uh, I did actually look at the what is division, and then sort of was like, I don't know. I feel like that could be a big thing, but it really shouldn't be. Maybe it's a good one to focus on. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay. Um, what is division? So, um, the first question I have that I'm all right. Hold up. Let's like write out a goal first. So the what I was going to say was about like I wanted to talk about partial and fractional numbers immediately, which is probably not good. Um, so so explain what division is. I guess that's the main goal. Um, so it sort of makes sense that if someone was reading this, then they probably know about multiplication and addition and maybe subtraction, but uh, not division. Um, so that gives us sort of a context to write in. Um,
Yep.
and pre-existing knowledge. So that's probably enough to start. Um,
Yeah, so I'd
we,
start with brainstorming. It can be very
yeah,
brief
okay.
things, not even sentences, but what are some of the relevant concepts you might bring up?
Numbers are made of other numbers. Um,
I'm not quite sure what
uh,
that means, but you probably know what you meant.
so
Oh,
factorization
factorization.
specifically.
Okay. Yeah, I know what that is.
Um, yeah, it sort of feels like that's a pretty crucial part of uh, like it makes sense to talk about um, multiplication. Like division is the inverse of multiplication. If they already know about addition and subtraction, then they know about being able to like add something and then take away the same thing to get back where you started. So if you multiply something and then divide, you get back to where you started. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Like opposite
whether
of
we,
multiplication could go on your list.
yeah, that's a better way to put it. Because numbers being made of other numbers is jumping ahead.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about the
Jumping,
order when you're brainstorming.
yeah.
Like it's okay to jump ahead.
Um, Whoop, that's not right. Um, um,
Is this a typo or something? Anything divided by 1 is 1?
sorry, it's itself is what I meant. Um,
Okay.
like anything over 1 is itself. So sort of, but not really. It was a brain fart though. Um,
I know what blocks is.
um, it's like a geometric interpretation of multiplication. Like you had like 4 by 3, and you like have
Okay.
um, not sure like um, yeah. Um,
Okay, so you've got some stuff related to division. One of the things I'm not seeing is what division is. Like specific, like what do you do when you divide, for example? What's the action?
so let me just think that over. So um, so yeah, so it's like breaking up numbers into some number of equal parts. That's equal parts is maybe ambiguous, but that's fine for the minute. The sum number, not so happy about that. So I think that's right. Yeah, 20 divided by 5. No, yeah, 20 divided by 5 is 5 equal parts. Is the size. So there's so like if I go with a geometric explanation, which is probably a good way to start, then we've got like the size and number of chunks. That's a reasonable way to put it. So disambig. We go this. So I feel like these two things together are probably enough to write an explanation. There's like some abstract stuff here to get rid of because of the audience, but I feel like this is sort of pretty much a pretty good scaffold. We've got other details like these sort of things. I don't know if whole numbers and fractional numbers are necessary at the moment. They sort of come up pretty early, but Um,
Yeah, I
but
probably wouldn't worry about them. You can start with a division that just comes out nicely.
we can also still describe 0 and 1. We can still talk about 0 and 1 sensibly with that definition. Um, is there anything else we need from the top part? These two. So one of the things I'm immediately struggling with is I've got these. So I've got I can talk about a total. So I get rid of one of the things. Um, I mean, is it fair to start with something like you already know about addition, multiplication, and subtraction? I feel like that's just um, probably not, or it's not
Uh,
really adding
yeah, you
value.
can probably assume they know that if you want to, but like telling them that doesn't seem that useful.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. So, first of all, this isn't really a topic sentence.
No, that's what I was thinking. Is that it doesn't like I'm introducing the idea of like, or I'm about to, of like operations that go in the other direction for multiplication. I don't know if we even need that. Like, do I need to talk about addition here?
Yeah, that was gonna be my second point, is I wasn't sure that it was necessary. So I think
So,
you need a bit more of an outline, like what's your main point going to be? And then what are like three subpoints you want to use that will help it in some way?
um, um, this feels a bit awkward. I'm not sure if I'll just treat this like an outline at the moment. So, but that last sentence feels awkward.
Yeah, the
Um,
last sentence is a bit tricky to follow, but I
um,
know what you mean. I think it makes
yeah,
sense. But if
it's
someone doesn't already know division, it's gonna be a bit tough.
yeah. I'll figure that out in the thing. Um, so when sort of like that order feels like the right sort of thing. Um,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
actually
essentially
like
the
the
outline.
other order more because it starts with like the topic and it explains,
Mm,
like it gives them a better outline of what's going to happen. So then when you talk about multiplication, they know why you're talking about it. If you start with multiplication when the question was about division, people won't know what's going on. So this like
yep.
sets the stage in a very brief way. And then you say something about multiplication and then you explain from there. So they see how it fits together.
So I sort of want to introduce it from the point of view of multiplication, like, um, though I'm thinking about a topic sentence. I'm not sure if I'm thinking about it too much. Um, in that, well, what I want to write is something like, uh, so something like that, where multiplication combines two numbers, but how do we go backwards? But division is now not in the topic sentence if I did that, and the topic sentence is a question, which I'm not sure if that's great. Um,
Yeah, if the prompt is what is division, then that doesn't work well as a topic sentence. Like if I wanted to open with that, I would just write a previous sentence like division is unmultiplying and then say multiplication combined. And then it would be directly answering the prompt to begin with, just very briefly, so people have more idea what's going on.
so I think I'm okay with that. So I don't like saying this feels just too non-specific because it's too similar to addition. Um, um, okay, so I was thinking about a geometric interpretation. So
This is a lot of blue words.
um, which sorry, one way to think about. I mean, an interpretation of. Um, I sort of because so if I'm going to explain division in terms of multiplication or in terms of the same like analogy or metaphor or whatever else, um, then by extending the explanation about multiplication, uh, I need to explain multiplication first, which I think is reasonable in that often things will like explain a previous concept in a particular style or language or whatever else so that they can then use that to explain the next part to sort of like synchronize the
Yeah.
reader. Um, so that's so I want to say one way to think about multiplication, but I don't want to use so many glue words. So um, we could just say
So
like,
I think the problem you're trying to solve is that there are multiple perspectives on multiplication that are
mm,
all correct. Like multiple reasonable interpretations or ways to view it or use it or something.
mm,
And you didn't want to just state one of them as like if it was the singular truth.
yep,
Is that the issue?
that's yeah. Um, like this is a or if I'm going with a geometric interpretation, I mean
Yeah.
it's sort of
So
like
I
yeah,
would start by writing it the straight way, the short way, and then fix it second. Like see how it comes out and then see what modifications you can make. And that might work better than starting with the defensive writing before you've even seen the problematic version.
I mean um that's confusing, but all right. Well, how one thing I'm just thinking of here is uh like writing this sentence in multiple different ways. So because I'm sort of stuck on it, maybe if I just write down different ways of writing it, it'll sort of like a decent way will sort of fall out. Um,
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's good to do that without the glue words because then you're just focusing on writing the main point several ways, and you can deal with the glue words as a second thought process. So it's fewer things to deal with at once.
Um, so if I say something like that, like using amount instead of number, it sort of makes it clear that these are two different things. Um,
Yeah, repeating the word number there would be problematic. So just using any other word makes sense.
so now I'm thinking about the geometric interpretation. I want to say something like, um, sort of like thinking, I mean, in part thinking back to like multiplication be explained in like grade 3, or whatever it was, remembering like one of the aids they had was like wooden blocks of width 1 and length, like A, and then you'd get B
Yeah,
number of those blocks. I'm wondering if something like that is, um,
maybe try writing the division explanation. Like, assume that you had already said something satisfactory about multiplication, and then try to write division, and then you can work backwards based on what you want to say about division to find out what information about multiplication is necessary. Because division
one
is
thing I
the
can,
main point. So if you end up explaining division with blocks, then having blocks in the multiplication part would be good. But if you find a different way works better for division, then you'd end up not using blocks for multiplication.
ah, so one thing that I haven't sort of included in any of this is, or maybe it'll be obvious by the next thing I type, but like, um, when we divide a big number by a small number, we're asking like, and then if we break the big number into into chunks the size of the small number, how many chunks do we get? Um, so I'm particularly trying to deal with the case here where the numerator is bigger, or the dividend. No, not the divisor, the other thing. Um, uh, if the numerator is bigger than the denominator, then we're going to get numbers bigger than 1 out, which means that we don't necessarily have to explain fractions. But if we went the other way, it would definitely be fractional.
One of the things that can help is explaining it with an example, like dividing up pizza slices.
So I was thinking about, yeah,
You can do it
um,
that way as part of the paragraph, but you can also do it that way just as part of the pre-writing and as a different way to brainstorm and see if you got anything useful out of it.
so I want to say like, um, is this too many? There's a few sort of glue words, but it's not totally out of place because I'm setting the context of an example. I could just say
Yeah.
an example is cutting up a pizza.
Yeah,
Um,
probably don't get too hung up on that. Like, don't get hung up writing the glue words, but also if you have them, you can always remove them or edit them later.
yeah.
Um, so like maintaining flow so you can focus on what you're trying to do is pretty important.
Um, so this is something. So I've got like division is the opposite of multiplication, but that's not a very good sort of like definition or sort of thing there. It's not a very good being sort of thing. But I could say something like this. Um, one reason I don't like that is because we've sort of got the total and the number of parts. I guess we have equal sizes as well. We've got like, so they're sort of like our 3 questions that if we have 2 of these, we can answer the division question.
Yeah, one of the issues with the pizza example is it's resulting in fractions.
Well, um, what I was thinking of,
You're basically doing one pizza divided by 8.
what I was thinking was to rephrase it, because I sort of do that here, um, is to phrase it in terms of slices um,
Yeah.
instead, because then we can go to 8 slices as a whole pizza, but then we're dealing with 8 instead of 1.
Yeah, so like a standard example is we have 8 slices of pizza and 4 people. How many slices can each person have? And
Oh,
then
okay,
you
yeah,
get a
that's about
whole
right.
number.
Yep. Um, yeah, okay. Um, so that's probably good for introducing a remainder as well if we were going to do that. So, all right, let me go down this road. Um, So, um, this is pretty, like, it's a little bit removed from division done like this, but I think this is probably I mean, this middle sentence I'm not so sure about, but otherwise I think it's not a bad sort of thing in terms of the relationships. Um, I put this in. I feel like people are more comfortable if we show how it works with something they already know, but that it's not very good, like guessing. Um, uh,
I think that guessing thing is going to turn out like confusing or unnecessary, but
yeah,
it's good for the brainstorming phase. Like you want to be able
so
to come up with stuff like that rather than get stuck. It's a
yeah,
good try, but I don't think it came out great that time. Because the method of like guess what the answer to the division is and then check it is it's not a standard method, and
mm,
it's not necessary for understanding what division is.
yeah. Um, so this is not. So this seems like a useful bit of information is that like um so something like that. Um, like if like we need to know how big the total is, and then either the number of chunks or the size of the chunks, and then we can figure out the other number.
Yeah, that reads to me a little bit like division is a mathematical operation with certain properties. The properties are the following, which is sort of like talking about division instead of saying how it works.
Um, yeah, I mean, in the context of things though, like I've just said, like division is breaking something up into chunks of equal size.
Yeah, that
Um,
one makes sense. I was talking about the last part.
um, yeah, I was going to say, like in the context of the thing above it, is it like? I mean, it is. I could word it in terms of the other stuff though, in terms of a more abstract property. Um, the pizza example, if we start with the number of slices, it doesn't work as well to say that we've got some number of slices and we're going to have 2 slices per person. How many people do we have? That seems a bit. It works better with like this way. Um,
Yeah, I don't think you need to get hung up on explaining like both versions. Like you could just pick whichever one's more
yep.
convenient, and it'll give people a way of doing division.
something like that. As in, I don't mean to, yeah, because realistically, we don't need to really differentiate between like the size of the chunks and the number of chunks. We can just always say that we know the number of chunks. And then we're always trying to find the size. Um, so I want to say, like, division is how we break things up, but that sort of doesn't necessarily feel right.
Right, that is talking about what division is, what its properties are, instead of, so it's like it's talking about the thing instead of actually saying how to do it. It's sort of like saying carpentry as a way of building things. Like it's describing it rather than explaining it.
Yeah. How to do it is part of the explanation, though, right? Like, because there's, I mean, at the same time, you don't want a thing of saying uh, like what is division? Oh, division is the thing where you get like a big number and then you find out how many chunks go into it of some other number. Um, I guess that sort of is still what it is. It's a bit of method as well.
So if you
Um,
look at these two, do you see the difference between them?
uh, so
One's trying to make a point directly. The other one
yeah,
is adding like an extra layer of indirection about what
like
actions humans take or what they use it for.
division is the label we have for this process of dividing stuff up into groups, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like yeah,
This
as
one's about what we
opposed
use
to
it for. This one's about what it actually is.
I think I'm 2 seconds behind on the live stream. Yeah. Okay. So that if I'm trying to say what something is, then uh, words of indirection are a red flag.
Yeah, this kind of thing makes sense when it's more complicated. Like we use X to do Y when X and Y are like different things. Makes sense. But when they're basically the same thing, then you don't really need it. Like we use dividing stuff up into groups to divide things up into groups is
Yeah.
unnecessary.
Um, so here I say like division is breaking something up into some number of chunks of equal size. That's like, so is this is not bad. It was the other stuff that I wrote something and deleted it was the bad thing, right?
Yeah, I think this sentence is okay.
So this is again, it's sort of describing it again, but it's introducing an example. Like I'm saying something about division in that we do it all the time, but then using that to introduce an example that's relatable. So I'm not sure if that's good or not, whether it's even necessary.
Yeah, that's fairly audience dependent and goal dependent. And just generically, like, I don't love it, but it's okay. It's not that big a deal to say we do division all the time. And then for particular audiences, they might be interested in that fact for some reason.
Yeah, okay. Um, uh,
You can just write EG there instead
yeah,
of all that
that's,
stuff, and it would make sense.
yeah. So I put a line in here because I was going to, instead of saying like division is breaking something up into smaller chunks, I was going to restate it, but like in terms of this, but, or sorry, like this, but in terms of the pizza. So did I not say that? Like 2 slices large somewhere? Oh, that was up here. Whoops. But I feel like talking about the question of division is somewhat important. Like, um,
Oh, like a standard division problem.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
like when you see a question, what's 8 divided by 4? Like relating just the idea of the question to the answer there. Okay, so if we took this feels like a reasonable sort of thing on its own. All right, so the goal. What was the goal? Explain what division is. So someone should understand what division is, or someone doing this should be able to understand what division is from that. They don't you know about division. Um, we talked about some stuff. We didn't talk about this, but that's fine. Um, we didn't talk about that, but it's natural to go next. Um, sort of answered this, but not really talked about it. Okay, is there anything in the that we're missing from this then? Um, in terms of, we don't really need any of this particularly, like this stuff. It's all just sort of like ideas about how to. Okay, so division is breaking stuff up into groups of equal size. Example: if we had 8 slices of pizza and 4 people, how many slices does each person get? We have 8 slices and we need to give each person equal parts of the pizza. Since we have 4 people, we divide 8 slices by 4 people, which would give us 2 slices per person. One thing I could say is we can check this by multiplying 2 slices by 4 people by 4. I'm just wondering about units, but I haven't explicitly said that
Yeah,
division
the
is
units are
multiplication, right?
technically 2 slices per person, which you multiply by 4 people, resulting in 8 slices.
Um, yeah. So I'm just wondering whether it's like, I mean, I guess the way that people, well, what we would say is by multiplying 4 people by, whoops, 2 slices each. And that way we don't like, as in it's sort of weird if we start with 2 slices per person sort of thing, but if we start with 2 slices each, then that's more intuitive for like a, someone who's like 10 or something. Um, yeah. I've got 2 slices each here. That's fine though.
Okay, should I try it and then we'll compare?
Yep, that sounds good. Oh, I'm just going to the bathroom real quick while you type that up. Okay. Do we care about numeral 4 versus spelling 4?
Not really.
Cool.
I guess numeral for consistency.
I remember some rule about it. Or I remember that a rule exists. Or that someone claimed a rule exists once.
Yeah, there are some rules of thumb. But that's just a style guideline.
Yep. Um, Depending on the audience, I mean, the groups or piles, does it add anything to say like the shape doesn't matter or something like that?
Uh, if you think your audience would think the shape mattered,
Yeah, okay.
my first instinct is that that probably wouldn't come up. Because we'd say the number of things in each group is the answer, so it emphasizes that number, not shape, is what we're looking at.
Yep.
So what do you think of this version?
Um, I think you have a few more sentences, which is probably good. One thing that I was thinking about when writing stuff, particularly like the first one,
These
there's
ones are
some.
optional though. Like, you could just delete them if it
Oh
needed
yeah.
to be shorter.
Um, oh, not that. I mean, like your first paragraph there. If I take out this multiplication thing, then I think I'm not sure if they say exactly the same thing in terms of the detail in them. We've got like evenly dividing stuff up. Um, example groups things, answer the groups.
I think we both have 6 sentences.
Yeah, yeah, okay, I've got 6 as well. If you've got 6.
Some of mine are shorter. Maybe that's what you noticed.
Towards the start, yeah. So I tried to.
Oh, I have 7 if you count the colon as a separate sentence.
No, I was thinking like there's extra clauses and stuff, but I think we've got like conjunctions and stuff, so I don't think it's needs to be counted as a separate sentence. Um, I mean, are we going to count the question in the quotes as a separate sentence, for example? Um, so uh, okay, so what the one bit of detail that I'm missing is like what I should say. If someone asks what's 8 divided by 4, then they want to know the uh, like size of the groups if there are 4 groups and 8 things total. Um, then they're sort of almost functionally identical. I think I might give more example sentences, but yeah. So there's like redundancy in this sentence and this sentence though. Like, why do I say this? I mean, I guess it's just a reasoning step would be, I think. Start with these things and need to give people equal sizes. But I don't think that's necessary. There's no real extra detail in that, right? Whereas everything in yours, I think, has extra detail. Um, so each could have 2 stones. So this is like, um,
Yeah, I was trying to keep each statement simple and purposeful. Most of them are a single clause sentence. It's just trying to do one thing.
yeah. We started with. Uh, I'm just saying, since that's a situation in the question. Anyway, um,
So, bigger picture. I think this kind of stuff comes with a lot of practice. It's an ongoing process to get more experience writing clear communications. and editing them and making good choices about which things from your brainstorming are important to include and so on.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think I need to practice this a bit. Um, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully you can see how this is kind of an underlying skill to philosophy discussion or something like that. Like you
Mm.
want to be able to take an idea and explain it in a fairly simple way. And if that's tricky, then having a philosophy discussion is going to be very difficult.
Yeah. Yep. Um, uh, do you know of any, like, one thing I'm thinking of is, so if I wanted to do a bunch of these as practice, um, do I need anything to really generate them? Like, I mean, I could just, I don't know, like ask questions that I think a 5 or 10-year-old might ask. Wondering if there was like any, I don't know, like resources or something for simple stuff where people have written a bunch of articles or something like that, where I could just take the titles and try and write
WikiHow.
wikiHow. Oh, that's probably not a bad idea, is it?
They
Um,
have like illustrated guides to lots of simple things. Fixing a squeaking ceiling fan. Measure personal growth. Relieve middle back pain. Build up your cardiovascular system. Get mental help when you cannot afford therapy. These are expert co-authored, allegedly. Do you think the expert co-authored it with GPT-3?
um, I, I think based on some of the WikiHow stuff I've read, GPT-3 might be more sensical. Um,
Maybe it's co-authored with mTurk.
there's, well, I
Bake a
mean,
yam. Change a diaper. Make a key lime pie. Get rid of a fever fast. Yeah, they have a bunch of basic stuff. How to use Skype. Knit socks.
um, how much does it matter that I'm trying to take something? So one thing that I'm somewhat hesitant of is like stuff that I don't know how to do, like make an or B stress ball, um, uh, which is just off the bottom of your page. Whether like reading something like this and then turning that into uh like a thing is a good idea, or whether it should be something that I'm trying to come up with off the top of my head, instead of translating what someone else has written. I sort of feel like it's possibly cheating if it's what someone else has written because a lot of the explanation and selection is already there and done. Um,
Yeah, I figured you could just use the topics without reading the article until after you write something.
yeah. Well, I can just skip over any ones that I don't know how to do. Um,
Yeah, you can also try some where you don't know what you're talking about. Like, don't start with those initially, but that is a thing you can practice is like, what can you come up with about topics you don't know very much about? You can try them with or without research, and those are, situations you'll run into.
yep.
Because often, even if you don't have a good answer, you can come up with some answer without being wrong. Um, that's often possible, so that's a decent skill to be able to like know something or like think about it yourself for a little while and come up with something that isn't too bad.
Always want to know how to hack a computer. So, oh, sorry, that's on my screen, on the background there. One of them is this is. I mean, they've all got at least 11 steps. It must be good. Oh, that one's got 10.
Yeah, they go into a lot of detail on things that you might not think need that much detail, but there seems to be demand for it, like enough for their site to exist, which I think says something about like a lot of people need more help than the typical resource actually gives them.
Hmm.
Like I think there's something useful about this for actually a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've like ended up at wikiHow before. For stuff like I don't know how to do a lot of stuff around the kitchen, for example.
Yeah,
I've come on here
yes.
for
Some of the
various stuff like that.
practical skills, just having a few pictures can be good. Sometimes, like, you try to look something up and you just want to know, like, one really basic thing about it, and all the guides are, like, assuming you already know or, like, skipping over parts, and it can be annoying. So they're actually pretty good at not doing that.
Mm. But yeah,
But we can just brainstorm some topics, like, try to come up with a few that might work well.
um, all right. So I don't know why, but how to read a dictionary. Well, um, 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 I'm doing lots of hows, which I'm not necessarily happy with.
Hows are fine. You can start with some of those. They're often a bit simpler.
Yeah, okay.
Alright, I'm putting my list in tutoring, so you can grab those too. You want
Cool.
to try some of them?
Yep. No, I think they're good. That's probably, well, that's, I mean, like 22 or something like that. Um,
Yeah, and if you run out or you just want other ones, wikiHow seems to have some decent topics.
Admittedly, 22 is probably a decent number. Um, but yeah, cool. All right. Um, I've got this grammar stuff. My sleeping schedule is hopefully fixed properly now, which is good. Cool. All right. Um,
Okay, so did you watch any more of the videos or did you just work on this?
no, I didn't end up doing very much over the weekend. There was a lot of sleeping and stuff. When I say stuff, I mean not stuff. Um, yeah. Um,
Okay. If possible, I think it'd be good to try for both.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
Even if you don't pay a lot of attention to the videos, like, or don't study them or something, I think just making some forward progress on them, even if you have to lower your standards, would be good, and to, keep two different things moving along at once.
Yeah. I'm have become fairly conscious of how badly I'm managing my time in terms of uh like doing stuff like replying to like FI stuff as opposed to doing exercises or watching grammar stuff or whatever else. Um, and what do you call it? The end of last week when I did that like Zaz thing, that was like 2 hours. Um, I'm yeah, I think I need to take a step back from a lot of that and focus on this stuff particularly. And that's been sort of an issue. So I'm trying to yeah, I'm thinking about that and trying not to do the unfocused stuff.
Okay, also, if you do those things, try to think about what you like about them, or what value they have to you, or what the benefits are or something. Um,
Mm,
don't just focus on the cons, but try to understand what the pros are for you. And try not to assume that they're bad. Like, if you keep finding yourself doing it, then that's an indication that there's some sort of value, probably. Even if overall it might not be the best choice, there's at least some sort of conflict there between the pros and the cons that you could try to understand more.
yep. Yeah. Cool. All right. I'll see you in 2 days.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye.